Jennifer, can you kind of introduce yourself just a little bit, just for people who may not know you, and just a little bit about your background, and then we're going to jump right back into that question, Rebecca.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you all for having me. I'm Dr. Jennifer Turner. I'm an assistant professor of sociology at Hollins University. And my research focuses on kind of the intersection of race, class, gender, and the family. But within that, I look at respectability politics and how that shapes how low-income Black mothers see themselves and their mothering activities. And I've also become recently interested in wanting to look more into this and how it shapes like our perception of Black women's sexuality, particularly with regard to hip hop. But that's a like new interest of mine that I haven't really gotten into yet. But yeah, thank you all for having me. And so you want me to go ahead and answer?
Yeah, actually, Rebecca, can you repeat the question? I think you're on mute.
Yeah, no problem. So the question is, why is Black women owning their sexuality not celebrated in our community?
Yeah. So I think back all the way to specifically in the context of the US and Black women's experiences, slavery and the hypersexualization of Black women, of Black women's bodies, and the Jezebel controlling image of like the quote unquote unrapeable Black woman, this idea that Black women have this insatiable sexual appetite. And I think for so long, Black people have been trying to get away from that and away, Black women specifically, and away from those stereotypes. And so because of that, we have, you know, the emergence of respectability politics with the Black church and like the early 20th century and things like that. Trying to uplift the race is really the goal of that. But it ends up really kind of putting Black women in a box of either it kind of is like similar to the virgin whore dichotomy where it's like either you're the Jezebel or you're the Black lady, this like respectable Black middle class woman. And so it really doesn't give a lot of room for Black women to define ourselves and our own sexuality. And yeah, just make our own choices and say what we like and what we don't like and all of those things. So yeah, I guess, another thing I wanted to mention too is just how historically Black women's bodies haven't been our own in the sense of like, again, going back to slavery, the slave master or our husbands in the context of heterosexual relationships or fathers, you know. And so when a Black woman owns her own sexuality, it's seen as very threatening to not only the patriarchy, but specifically in this case, Black male patriarchy. So it's very deep rooted. And I feel like we have made some strides, but we have a long way to go to kind of like get to a better place with this.
I agree. If I can jump, I think we'll talk about this a little bit later, but I think also what plays a big part of that is, and I know some people are not going to like this, but just FYI, I'm usually pretty critical of the church just because I come from that space. That church spaces have really perpetuated that as far as what Dr. Jennifer was saying, with our bodies not being our own, that we are built for pleasing a man. We are built for birthing children. We are built for the gratification of men sexually, but we are not to experience that. And so there is a lot of theology around that where women's bodies really belong to their husband or their significant other. And so I think in that has helped with the perpetuation of this idea that when Black women decide, wait a minute, I enjoy sex, I enjoy my sexuality, like I enjoy having multiple partners, I enjoy whatever that is for them, whatever that looks like, is shamed because a lot of times theology that people have been under has taught them that women do not have control over their own autonomy. And so I think that's a big part of why we see that in the community too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I also come from the Black church. So like and it's like, it wasn't until I got older that I realized that a lot of that has caused like sexual trauma. You know, we experience trauma around all that stuff. And then we we experience shame, and we are shameful. We feel shameful about our bodies because of it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Because I mean, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, being in the church, and not all churches are like that, of course, but being in the church, it's always that the mistakes of men and grown men, especially as a young Black girl in the church, it's your fault and it's your responsibility to be mindful of that, and it's not fair, and it's putting that weight and that burden on small Black girls who are sexualized much younger than anyone else, and it's not fair, and we do end up carrying it long term.
That's purity culture in a lot of ways. And for people who are listening, purity culture really is, in my personal opinion, always enforced on women specifically, but we're in this conversation, Black women, where we are expected to be virgins. We are expected to remain pure. I remember there is a popular, I don't know if they're popular, maybe some people don't know who they are, but they are pretty known in that church space. And I remember this young woman, she was a virgin until she got married, and she gave her certificate of virginity to her dad at her wedding. So that,
I remember that.
This is a Black family. We've known a lot about that in white evangelical spaces, like with purity culture, but it's in the Black community too, and in Black church spaces as well. And I just thought that was the weirdest thing. I was like, I don't want my dad knowing my business about my vajayjay. That's weird.
So weird.
It's like the whole part about, marriage and sex is wild, because you'll have a congregation that doesn't want to talk about sex, doesn't want to teach women how to be safe, don't want to teach us how to take care of ourselves. But when you get married, they talk about what's the C word? They always want to talk about consummating the marriage.
Yes.
Oh, it's just something they just want to talk about. And that's weird, because we've never talked about sex before. We've never talked about what it means in Christianity, what it means in your regular life, how it feels. So you just go in blind.
Yeah.
And then you're supposed to know exactly what to do to make yourself and your spouse happy, but specifically yourself.
Yeah. And if you've never been taught how, like, anything about your body, at least in a positive way, and any positive things about sex and sexuality, or even learned about them, then how are you supposed to do that? So it's like a double bind, going back to what Marielle was saying. You're expected to be a virgin, but at the same time to be experienced enough to specifically, because we know that this is also a heteronormative culture too. So like specifically to make a man happy, to please him, right? So it's just, it's a double bind.
Absolutely.
Totally. Now we've been talking about how we haven't been in touch with our sexuality and how we've been taught not to be. How can Black women be more in touch with our sexuality and our bodies?
Yeah, well, I mentioned earlier kind of the trauma that a lot of us experience because of either our experiences maybe in the church, in our families, or in other relationships that we've had in the past. And so one of the ways that came to mind for me was like trying to heal from that trauma, which is a really, really hard thing to do. And you can't really do it alone. So therapy helps, education helps, and things like that. But that is one way I think that Black women can become more in touch with their sexuality. Also, like surrounding yourself by like a supportive, nurturing community of other Black women that, are also sex positive and things like that. Like, I know that's one thing that's helped me, like having these types of conversations with my friends. Getting to know our bodies and what we like and dislike, which means also like experimenting with self-pleasure, which is okay, but also something we never talk about, and also something that is kind of frowned upon if it is talked about, because that's important to know. And yeah, I think I was going to get into some of the other things later, but those are kind of the three that came to mind for me first.
Yeah, I think for me, it was the masturbation piece. And the reason why I say that is because, again, I know what it is like coming out of church spaces, and that is shame. Like, you're not supposed to have sex with yourself. Well, okay, so here's the issue. It's looked at as demonic. In my personal opinion, you need to know how to pleasure yourself. You need to know what what turns you on, so you're able to communicate that to your partner. And I think that's really important. And so I think the first part of getting over that shame is you not being ashamed of your own body.
Yeah.
And you exploring your body, like, because that's literally the only way that's kind of going to happen. And I think it makes you more confident and more vocal, especially when it comes to your sexual pleasure, in saying, hey, I don't like that. I don't know where you got that from, but that don't feel good. Or, you know what I'm saying? Like, this is what I like, and being very specific in that. But I also agree with you too, being around women who are free. Like that for me, like you were saying, has been like, I can't even express how the impact that's had. Like, just listening to women who are even in a theological perspective, for me, with pro-Heaux theology, that has been really monumental for me. And just being able to read certain literature from people who are already there. And I always tell people, you always find people who are where you want to be. So that's what you're aiming for. Find people in community that you can connect with, whether it's, personally or from a distance, whether they have, material or things out there where they express, their thoughts and beliefs behind certain things. So that's been really, really huge. I want that for Black women. And I'm seeing this upward swing of, we like, yo, no, this is not 500 years ago. Like, no, I am a sexual being.
Yeah.
I think there's this misnomer that, where there's this idea that men think about sex a lot more than women do. And I was like, I don't know. I was like, I think women think about sex pretty much just as much as men do. That's my personal opinion. But I really hope that women can kind of get to that point of owning their sexuality, owning their body. And that, to me, that's the first place it starts, is by you exploring your body.
Yeah, I agree. And I think maybe one reason why a lot of women are afraid of this, though, is like, what is it called? Pick me culture. Like, they want to be chose, right? Even me, I have to admit, right? I'm a feminist and all this, but I have to admit, I still want to get married to a man and all these things. And we know that men still, specifically Black men, still uphold a lot of these things we're talking about. And so it's hard because, yes, I want to like fully embrace my sexuality and all these things, but then I don't want to be, I don't want that to result in like not being able to find a husband. I know that sounds terrible, and like, and I also don't want to not be who I am. It's just a really weird situation, but I think that's why a lot of Black women are maybe afraid of even going there.
I would say sitting with I'm married and I'm in a heteronormative couple, but I'm queer. And I would say, like, knowing yourself and knowing what you like, what you don't like, what you prefer, all these things, knowing yourself, and then a mate will appear. But I do agree about the pick me culture. Like, pick me's will make you feel bad about brushing your teeth. Like, they will make you feel bad about anything under the sun, because it's the idea that if you get a man, it takes a man away from me, instead of if you get a man, I'm also going to get a man, and it's not going to be your man or your partner. But typically pick-me's are heteronormative and not anything else, because you could find anybody you like and have and suit those needs. And I also think that a lot of pick-me's fall under traditional gender roles, which you have to decide if that's something you want to. And owning yourself, what you like, what you don't like, what you're willing to do in a relationship will really change the dynamic. And speaking of dynamics, and when we talk about self-pleasure and things like that, I think it leads a lot into knowing your body and knowing where your consent lies, so that when you are in a relationship or you are in a sexual relationship or just a regular relationship, you know where your lines of consent are, and it's not muddied for you. The more you know yourself, the more you know where your lines are. That doesn't mean they're not going to be disrespected. It just, you know for yourself where you are. And I think that's really important when we talk about owning our sexuality and being in touch with ourselves, is knowing ourself and not relying on our partner to show us about ourselves.
Absolutely.
That's definitely part of the patriarchy. Is you're expected to let your partner tell you like who you are. So when you are saying no, I don't want to do that, or you are just strong-willed, let's just remove sexuality away from it. When you're just like strong-willed and you're like, this is what I want to do, it's like that is shamed in itself. And as Black women, I think we can attest to that even in workspaces when we're assertive, when we are saying, you know, we're making decisions. It's like we're aggressive. We are all these things because they want to always dictate to us who we should be. So when we know who we are naturally within ourselves, it's always going to be an issue. It's always a problem. We're deemed something. So in the sake of this conversation, we would be called a hoe. But in workspaces, we are abrasive, we're aggressive. Like, so there's always going to be some negative connotation when you are secure in who you are.
Yeah, and that goes back to, for me, bringing it back to like theory, how you mentioned earlier, the whole idea of self-definition, which is so important to Black feminist theory, being able to define ourselves for ourselves, you know, pulling from like Audre Lorde. But like you said, when we do that, it's threatening. Like I don't know if you all have seen the Billie Holiday movie on Hulu, but it made me think of that because she was seen as a threat to the FBI and the US government, in part because she was like defining herself and speaking her truth and singing her truth and doing things that she wanted to do. This successful Black woman pushing back against all of these mainstream, you know, norms and ideals that has always been seen as a threat, you know? And unfortunately, we have to struggle with it even from, you know, men in our own, of our own race and culture.
Oh, that's
Who
right there.
those same men who will shame us will find someone else of a different race and with the same qualities and exalt them.
Yeah.
Versus what we get.
Factual. And it's a power grab in my personal opinion. Like when I see I don't know how I'm making this relate, but somehow it does relate. So they were saying that support for Donald Trump amongst Black men went up exponentially with this second election. And I really thought about that. And I'm like, why? And I was like, oh, because he represents what a lot of times Black men want to be, which is having this power without consequences and being able to just kind of do what you want to do. Because to me, Donald Trump represents like he's a white man who is mediocre at best. But because of how patriarchy is set up, has been allowed, and how white supremacy is set up too, how he's been allowed to obtain this level of power and do whatever he wants to do with very little accountability. And unfortunately, that translates into Black men who are indoctrinated into patriarchy. There's some awesome Black men who are not, and they're against patriarchy. Big shout out to them. But for the Black men that are, that's a big piece of it. It's a power grab, and they want to be able to dictate to everything and everybody so they get the benefit of it, to the detriment of whoever else is around. So they don't care as long as it's the power that they have. So that's a big piece of it.
Which I don't understand, because when we talk about social justice and we talk about who's fighting for us, it is our Black women, it is our Black queers, it is our Black anything other than cishet Black men. Because on the front lines, you have Black women, you have Black trans women, you have Black children fighting for their safety. But the first chances they get to protect us, we don't get the same in return. It's heartbreaking.
Factual. I was in, I think, a Clubhouse room one time. I don't really be on Clubhouse that much because it starts to get on my nerves at some point. But there was a room where it was labeled that Black men are the white people of Black people.
The white women.
Sit with that. Yeah, I really.
Black men are the white women of
that. And I was like, wow. And I really, because I was like, what? But then as I started listening to the conversation, I was like, damn. Like it really kind of, I was like, that's interesting. I don't think that it's all Black men. So I really want to say that again. Yeah. I think the ones that are definitely benefactors and the ones who crave power with that patriarchy offers them. So I want. make sure I say that again.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to bring it back to us and leave those cishet men over there. And so I want to ask, how do we teach body positivity and healthy sexual ethics to young Black women? How do we do that?
Yeah, so I think one of the big things we have to do is we need better sex education across the board. Like, I don't know so much what it's like now. I do often ask my students about this, and it doesn't sound like it's changed much since I was in K-12. But sex education focused around sex positivity, body positivity, and consent, as you mentioned earlier, Rebecca, like having these really important conversations about consent really, really early on. And kind of going along with that, also encouraging self-pleasure, taking the stigma away from masturbation and self-pleasure, and kind of framing it as a way to learn about your body and learn, again, what you like, what turns you on, and things like that. Because I think that and the consent conversation kind of go hand in hand in a way. And so, yeah, we really need a radical transformation of sex ed. And it would be great if it was like a feminist, queer, all those things, sex ed, but just starting with just a transformation of it from a place of sex positivity and body positivity would be great. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me it's a couple of things. Number one, I don't like this conversation like, oh, we need to have the talk. It's like, no, we need to keep having an ongoing conversation because people have questions. So as parents or as a village to young girls coming up, I do think that it's important that we be open and honest with them when they have legitimate questions about their body, about sex, and like you were saying, about consent, because there is this culture of pressure of, which still falls under patriarchy, but there is that of being able to say, no, I don't want to do that, and being okay in saying no. But I do think it is us really being able to have very open conversations and dialogue and not leaving it to just one conversation, that it will continue on and on and on. Being honest about body parts. Like when I was 5, I was like, what is that? Like when I would see a man, because I could tell that they were different from me. And so I appreciate that my mom was honest. Of course, she said it in a way that a 5-year-old can comprehend, but you know what I'm saying? Like she was very honest about, so there, I didn't see any shame in that. This is just natural. And I just have a question because I can tell that that person looks different from me. So just being able to just be open, honest, and be willing to have ongoing conversations, I think, with young girls and creating a safe space for that. I know there's a lot of places that aren't safe, but I think hopefully we can get, sometimes I think as a parent, I'm not one, but I think as a parent, because this is your child, it's harder. So maybe you can find people that are in your village who can maybe help with that conversation. Because I'm sure that's not the easiest conversation to have, because they will probably always see them as your baby, right? But they are young women. And I'd rather you hear it from me and the people in our village, your little raggedy friends who don't know what they're doing either. Just so you are well aware and you can make informed decisions and choices. I was in a family where my mom was like, when you're ready, please come talk to me and we will make sure you got everything that you need. Because I don't need you out here in these streets making really bad decisions. But I want you educated on what you need to do. So I think that's where it starts. So I think that's the big thing for me. It's just an ongoing conversation and being honest.
Yeah, that's really cool that your mom said that to you, though, because I think so many parents are afraid, and I understand being afraid, but some parents, for example, see taking their child to get on birth control or whatever as permission to have sex. I've heard that argument and as a reason to not do it. And obviously, I don't agree with that, but but yeah, just being willing to like have the conversations. And like you said, if you don't feel comfortable doing it, finding someone, you know, who's better positioned to do it. There's also lots of books, you know, and even books about consent that are for children, that frame it in a way that children can understand. So, I mean, there are ways to definitely do it. Yeah.
In my mind, I'm seeing more inclusive language and more language as our language about these subjects grow. There are more words, there are more ways to label things, including that language in the way that we talk to young women, letting them know that the options are out there and that those are options that they can think about, explore if they see fit. But I definitely agree with Dr. Jennifer about sex education and how important it is and honest it needs to be. I think I took sex education in the 6th grade, and it was focused on men or males and their reproduction and everything that had to do with them. And we were a backseat. But if we use more inclusive language and we taught honest sex education, I think it would absolutely be best. And I definitely am the person in my friend group who is ready and available to talk to them at any point, at any time about anything that has to do with sexuality and sex. I am always, including new words, and honestly, it will make a difference. It does make a difference. The longer you talk about it, the more you talk about it, the more those hearts soften. And I see hearts soften a little more when it comes to my diehard Christian friends. The more you talk to them and remind them what love is when it comes to subjects like these, and supporting each other and supporting your friends and your daughters, hearts will soften and mouths will open to teach more and more and more.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I totally agree. I will say this too, because I experienced it as a kid and it wasn't my fault, but growing up, like I developed a lot earlier. I think so, probably by like 5th grade, I had the body of probably like a 15, 16-year-old, just being honest. And so because of that, like grown men would hit them. First of all, they knew that I was a minor. So it wasn't even, I didn't look like a grown woman. I looked like a minor. And it taught me this shame, I think, about a body that I did something wrong. And I don't hear us address that enough, because reality is young women, they do develop a lot earlier. And so their body is not matching how the age they are and the maturity level that they are. And so it can leave this impression with you that, oh, I must have done something wrong because this grown man is hitting on me and saying that he wants to sleep with me. Like, and I was experiencing that at 10. So the impression that left on me that maybe something was wrong with me, and it caused me to develop this shame. So I think a part of that sex education to young Black girls is that you are not responsible for the creepiness of men. I'm sorry. Like you do not bear that burden, like at all. Because I think I don't know if y'all are like me, but like I experienced that a lot growing up. And so it left me with like this complex that, because I remember probably by like 7th grade, I was covered up. Because I just felt like I would be wearing big baggy clothes, because I'm thinking, okay, maybe I just needed to attract attention from myself, because I didn't really have anybody to talk to about, because I thought my mom would be I don't think she would have been mad, but I think in my brain, I thought she would have been mad that like these men were like hitting on me. I was in the 5th grade, like, and I don't know how to handle that. And I'm like, was something wrong with my body? Like, did I do something? So I think a part of that sex education is to teach girls early that you do not have to bear the stupidity of men, and you are just fine. That's on them, not you.
Yeah, I did experience that too. Like I started to develop early, and I do remember being in 5th grade and trying to like hide like my boobs and stuff because I felt shameful about it too. I don't think I wasn't able to really, I didn't know why I felt shameful necessarily, but I know that I did. And I felt, because I was like developing faster than the girls around me in part, And so I was like comparing my body to theirs and stuff. So Yeah, I agree with you totally.
And Marielle, I think as a culture, and I think for the protection and safety of our young Black women, we also have to call out these disgusting men who are making our young girls feel that way, whether that's in our family, our church, our spouses, friends, no matter who it is. We also have to put our foot to their necks and let them know that you're not going to make them feel that way and get away with it.
Yeah, because the reality is, I think there's a statistic that says Black girls are sexualized as early as the ages of 5. And Black boys are looked at as older than what they really are. So, like a Tamir Rice, they were like, oh, well, that was a grown man in the park, right? So that and not just white people do that. I think we do that within our own culture. We see these young girls, we see them as, we see them as older than what they really are, and they're kids. So yeah, that piece of it really bothers me, because I think about some young women who maybe they don't have somebody to kind of give them guidance in their life, and the manipulation that can take place with older men to them, by them being taken advantage of. And there's that consent issue again. And then also there's a lawful one too, because you're grown, but it's messing with a minor. Right. So yeah, I think we have to talk about how Black women, even when we're younger, that we become sexualized when we're not even ready for that. We're not even thinking about that. We're just being kids, right? And so there is definitely a conversation to be had centered around that.
Yeah, I mean, I think about that whole rhetoric around like fast girls and how often the girls get blamed for it's like the victim blaming, essentially, of like how how they dress is criticized. And I thought about dress codes and how when I was in high school, the white girls would get away with wearing like really short shorts, but when the Black girls did it, we got in trouble. And I remember asking the assistant principal one day like why that was, and she's like, because Black girls develop faster, is what she said. And I was so upset. But I mean, I unfortunately couldn't do anything about it, but it's just like, yeah, it's body shaming. That's body shaming to me. And it's infuriating that happens. So yeah, I agree with you.
Imagine getting body shamed in our everyday lives, like we're at school or whatever that is. But then now going back to the theology piece of it, in a church space being said, taught that you are responsible. So if a man falls, it's your fault. Like I'm thinking like you're getting that double entendre. Of course you're going to feel some kind of way about your body. Of course you're not going to feel secure. Of course you're going to feel like it's bad for you to say, wait a minute, I enjoy pleasure, or like I'm a sexual being too. Like, so all those messages, I just think about the different communities that we could possibly be in as Black women. And that's a consistent, I see why we would have a complex.
Absolutely.
I know where we should go next. At the top, we talked about WAP. And the beautiful, colorful video and all the things they had to tell us about, loving yourself and taking care of yourself. I want to talk about Jasmine Sullivan's Heaux Tales. And I really want you all to explain to me what the problem with it was. Now, I will say I can see how people felt away about, I think it may have been Donna's tale, where you're hearing, it sounds like an auntie and she's telling you how you trick in your everyday life. But yeah, but my mom, but we were raised not like in the community, like we were raised that if you're in a relationship with somebody like that, and you're having sex because you'll get something on the other side of it, that was something we were told, that I grew up hearing. So it wasn't, that's why I think it didn't surprise me by that, because I was told that when I was younger, that sometimes that's how relationships work.
Yeah, transactional. Yeah. Can I ask a question? So I've listened to the album, but I didn't know about the backlash to it. So what are people saying?
So I think that there is this, first of all, that it was called Heaux Tales, but
Okay.
that she spells it, there's a history behind that. And I don't know the full extent of it, but I believe that it was created, that spelling of Heaux Tales was created by a Black woman to reclaim that name. And I don't know if y'all remember when, was it Amber Rose, when she did the slut parade or something like that? So it's kind of along the same lines of reclaiming a word that typically is tossed at us in order to degrade us, but we're taking it as an empowerment tool, right? But I think people had an issue because she's very like, she's telling the straight up truth about what's going on. And I think it was the subject matter of it. Now, most people loved it because Jasmine Sullivan is just a vocal beast, like, period. But when you break down the topic of it, I think a lot of people are having some issues with it because, you know, I think the record opens up with her saying, bitch, you doing this again? Like, you sleeping with somebody you don't like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so it was like the nature of it. So some people were not feeling that. They felt like it was not a positive image. It was literally along the same lines of what we saw when we were talking about with WAP, of women talking about that. And like, this isn't a good role model. This isn't a good thing for young girls to hear. So there was that type of, you know, discussion around.
I get so tired of that. Like, first of all, why do we always have to be role models? One. Two, yeah, your little Black girl should not be listening to this. Like,
it's called parenting.
Exactly. I get so irritated when I'm like, oh, people are like, I'm not going to let my daughter listen to this. Well, why would you? Like, they should be listening to Kids Bop. You know what I mean? Like,
it said explicit.
Exactly. Would you let them listen to your favorite male rapper's album? Like, so why is that even part of the conversation?
They do, because those same songs play on the radio stations.
You're right.
That's the only thing. Our music gets censored way more. Okay, so way back in the BET 106 and Park days, do you all remember when Sierra's video came out? Ride It, and she was like sliding across the floor and dancing her little butt off, and they took the video down. But we can have every PD Pablo, every Yin Yang Twins talking, every Lil Jon record, and their videos play, but we can't do it where we own ourselves, we own our body. And I really dislike the conversation about it was like Cardi B got the backlash of, oh, it's good enough for my kids, but not yours. Well, that's for you to say whether it's good enough for your kids because they're your kids. Because she got a lot of backlash from cutting the song off when her small child came into the room. Well, the music isn't for her. It's for adults. It was made for adults by adults.
Yeah.
And she was being a good parent because that's being responsible. Like, she didn't want her little girl to hear that.
And she cut it off.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
It only makes sense. It only makes sense to us. And the other thing about Jasmine's album was that there was a lot of anticipation for it, and it came out and a lot of people listened to it. My opinion was you all did not listen to her music beforehand. You probably only listened to her when she came out in around 2010, but you haven't listened to the music in the meantime because the subject matter, even though it talked more about sexuality on this EP than her last albums, the tone was the same. The experiences mentioned were the same. Like when you listen to songs like Mascara and I can't remember the name of the other song, but it's pretty much about being the girlfriend of a rapper. It's all along the same lines, but you just threw yourself into this one and decided that she was wrong for what she was creating. And I find problems with that because when I was 10, Chris Brown was singing about things that he had no business singing about and that we had no business listening to. But he was in all the magazines that you could cut out and put on your walls.
Because that was expected. Like, I don't know if y'all remember, was it Bismarck? Dang it. The dude that does all the hype songs, like for Missy, like he's the hype person. I can't remember his name. Sorry, my brain is mush.
Fat Man Soup? Is it no?
Yes.
Yes, Fat Man, yes, him. Okay. So when he had a show on MTV, I remember Chris Brown being on there, and Chris Brown was a fresh 18. Like he had just turned 18. And he was talking to Chris Brown about sex, and Chris Brown was trying to tell him this is what you need to do to please your woman. Because that's just like, imagine if Chris Brown had been, Chrisette, like, woman having that conversation at 18, we'd be like, oh my God, she's fast. She out here sleeping with us, you know what I'm saying? But they were just having a 40-something year old man was having a conversation with an 18-year-old, and they were talking about sex. And Chris Brown is trying to give him advice on what he needs to do to please his woman.
That brings up a question in my head. Do these men, do they like women who like sex or who like consenting to like sex? Because they will shame women for being easy or being loose. So who are you having this sex with? If you're a heterosexual cis man and you're having sex with presumably a woman, what woman are you having sex with?
I think it's a talking point, in my personal opinion. So there's, you know how men always say, I want a lady in the streets and a freak in the sheets, right? Well, how do we gonna be freaks? Like, I don't even understand. Like, where you think we gonna learn that? I mean, like, none of the logic makes sense, but I just really feel like that's the thing that you're supposed to say. Like, she is just supposed to magically know how to complete what we were talking about earlier. She's supposed to magically know how to please you. And it's like, but wait a minute. Clearly, sometimes you need practice in order to get to the point that you're talking about. Like, so it never makes sense to me. But yeah, I think that they are, it's the equivalency of how people down sex workers, but then turn around and be their biggest clients. Like, it never is like, it's that logic. So
yeah. You shame women for having OnlyFans, but then you go subscribe to their OnlyFans.
Correct.
Just pay that girl and leave her alone. Pay that lady and leave her alone from now on. Because clearly you like her content.
Correct. Or you'll call her out of her name and she everything but a child of God, but then you're always watching. You the first one in the room. Like, so how does that work? I don't.
Yeah, it's like that politician who said that he saw WAP accidentally or something. Do y'all remember that? I don't remember his name, but like, it was like, no, you didn't see it accidentally. You sought it out and you wanted to watch it. Like,
there was a good 25-second intro while they were going through that house. You could have cut it off in the meantime with the fountains, with the booby fountains. You wanted to. You're right. You wanted to see it, and that's okay. It was beautiful. They had beautiful outfits. Bodies looked nice. Dancing was amazing, and they were talking about things that you should like. You should like to hear that a woman can do all of the things.
Exactly. I think the overall thing is that women have total control of what they want to do. And I want to say this in this conversation. If you want to have multiple partners, if you want to have, when I say multiple partners, I don't mean at the same time. I'm just saying that you can have several sexual partners within the span of however long you've been having sex, or you don't want to have sex at all. There's nothing, it's completely up to you. Like, and I think that's the issue. It's like when a woman makes up her mind, this is what I want to do. I think that's the problem is that men have is, and again, it's not men, but that a lot of these men have is that a woman is deciding for herself. This is what I want to engage in. This is what I want to participate in. This is what I don't want to participate in. And so I feel like that's where a lot of the backlash came, because I think I forgot the song, but when Jasmine is saying he's giving it to her so good, she paying rent, she paying all you know what I'm saying? Like, so she's making decisions about, you know what, I'm rewarding you because of how good you have put it down. I'm about to pay your rent for this month. You know what I'm saying? So whatever that is. So I think
put it down. It's put it down.
Oh, okay, great. So, I think that is the overarching thing is that women are making decisions and they have power plays in these moments. And a lot of men don't like that.
Yep. Because that falls outside of the context of patriarchy and all these other things. And then when you bring like OnlyFans into the conversation and all these other things, and you have women making money, that's autonomy, that's all these other things that you know, we as women within the context of patriarchy shouldn't have. So it's just, yeah, I don't know.
Right, because it pushes us again to the power, to the power, right? It's like, for instance, like I remember this is a long time ago, I was having a conversation with somebody. I was like, think about how men have profited off of women in the porn industry. What if women were able to take the power in that? So not only are they in front of the camera, but they're behind the camera. They are the people who own the company, the distribution company. I said, and there are women who have gone into that mode, like who are stars. They took control over the licensing of their bodies being, made dolls or certain pieces of that. And men were having a whole like meltdown when those women decided to do that. So I think anytime that women take on the role of, I'm about to take the power back, like, you've been profiting off of this, you've been benefiting off of this, now it's my turn. Like, no, if I'm gonna do it, it's damn sure it's gonna be for my benefit, not yours. And I think that has been the issue.
I also think that it's empowering to see a man who feels that he has power over you have a meltdown because he does not. We see it a lot on the internet, but I don't want to put them down. But you assumed that just because you were a man, you could have power over me. And when I show you, you don't, you have a temper tantrum. And although it pushes against our safety, it's wild to watch.
I mean, we just saw a Black woman be attacked for this, right? So I think, was it in New York? I think I have the state/city wrong. I think that may be wrong. But a Black woman walks into a convenience store and she just got off work. She's had a hard day. She needs to go pick up her baby, but she decides to stop at the convenience store, grab a bottle of wine so she can relax when she gets home. She puts the wine on the counter. These three guys enter. One of them, all three of them are Black. One of them, says, hey, can I take care of that for you? And she's like, no, I'm good. Thank you, though, for offering. And then immediately he goes, so you too good for me? Right? And she was like, no, I don't want you to pay for this. I'm good. She pays for her stuff, walks out. They follow her out, all three, and proceed to beat the living crap out of her. Like, to the point where people see this happening. They see boys jumping her and they call the police. And I wish you could have seen, and then one of them actually bit her. Like, she had this big gash in her forehead that were clear teeth marks. And I wish you could have seen what they did to this woman, all because she said, no, I don't need you to pay for this, but thank you. It's that mentality. It's those men, because you're not supposed to tell them no. I'm grateful that she is alive and that she's okay, but the trauma that caused, and how many women probably have that story because they told a man no, because in some men's minds and culture, and what they've been taught in culture is that women are to submit to you and they are to give you whatever you ask for. Whatever you need, they're supposed to provide. They're not supposed to fight back. They're not supposed to do any of that. And so when a woman takes ownership of, no, I'm not going to do that, or no, I don't want to participate, now all of a sudden it's a problem. And so that to me was a clear example of men who have that type of mentality, simply because she said, no, I don't need you to pay for this. And y'all proceed to beat her butt. Like, I did that whole thing. My blood was boiling. Like watching that unfolds.
That's horrifying. But there's other similar stories of like women who refuse to give a guy their number being attacked, or like you said, it all goes back to this idea that that we owe men something and that they essentially have the right to take whatever they want from us. So that's horrifying.
Can I say that throughout the conversation, Marielle has been very clear to specify that it is not all men. That it is not all men when we say men. I'd like those men who are not in that group that we're talking about to take responsibility for their friends, their coworkers, their brothers, their cousins, who put our lives in danger in this way, because it's so hard to get a not all men man to understand that I gave him my number so that I could be safe. No, I didn't want to do that, but I did it so that I know that I'm safe in this moment, in this time. Because you'll have that conversation and be like, well, why'd you give it to him? Because I don't know what he's going to do if I don't. And now I'm stuck.
Yeah. I mean, it's the equivalency of what we say to white allies all the time. Like, if you're going to be an ally, it is important that you're standing up in the rooms that we're not in, and for people who look like you. Like, that's what, to me, what really being an ally is to check people who look like you, that are operating within that framework of white supremacy and whiteness, and to say, hey, this is not okay, and here's why that's not okay. You do the educating in that space. Same thing here. It's like, if you are a man that is, is rails against patriarchy, rails against how, the denigration of women, and in this conversation, Black women, that when you're in the barbershop, when you're in those areas, those spaces, that you're correcting certain behavior and language, because language is important, because it tells you how people see a woman just by how they talk about them. By trying to correct that and give some guidance to that of why that's wrong, and educating in that space.
Yeah, and also going back to the conversations that parents have with children, like parents talking to their sons at a very young age about, how to respect women and treat women, things like that, like, is so important too, to help prevent some of that behavior from happening later on in life. Yeah.
Like, don't just teach your daughters like what to do to stay safe. You need to teach your sons how to take no for an answer.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think that's the key, is just teach your boys not to be douchebags. Like, it's not that hard. It's okay. We can give like some final thoughts on just this topic and what we kind of want to leave with people. Just from the conversation that we've had, because we covered quite a bit, just kind of what are your last final thoughts? And I'll know, Dr. Jennifer, if you want to go first.
Okay, well, I guess if we're talking about things we want to leave with people, I think I specifically want to talk to Black cishet men. Just like, listen to us and take us seriously, and stop accusing us of male bashing when we want to have these conversations, because these are really important conversations that we need to have in our community. And I think that if more Black men listen to podcasts like this and things like that, like, they could learn so much. And we could really like move forward as a community, and dismantle some of these things, because it still feels like we have a long way to go, unfortunately.
Absolutely. I think for me, it is for Black women who are out there, I think it is totally fine. Whatever you decide that you want to do, to me, as long as you're being safe and everybody in the situation is being safe, that you have total control and total right over your own autonomy. You don't have to wait for anybody else to give you permission. If that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. My biggest thing is that you're doing it safely, and that you are, loving yourself enough, and that is coming from a healthy place. Because I do think that sex can be utilized in an unhealthy way when we don't love ourselves all the way. So we make some choices that are harmful to us and eventually harmful to the people that we're engaging with and our partners. So just make sure that, first love yourself and, find out who you are and what you like, what you don't like. And I don't just mean in a sexual way, but I just mean just as a woman, period. Like, what you are willing to take, because I think that helps you as you start to get on this journey of embracing your sexuality, whatever that is, as a queer woman, as a heterosexual woman, whatever, it doesn't matter, but that you know who you are. And I think that helps you along your way in your journey. So yeah, own it, sis. You got this. Like, and find other women who, like I say, are where you are desiring to be. If you are a woman who is coming out of a church space, and I've met a lot of those, it's going to take some deprogramming. I'm going to be real. Like, you're going to struggle. But it is possible. And so there's some really awesome womanist theologians out there who are very pro-sex and sex positivity that can give you some guidance. And there's such great materials out there from a lot of them. So that's my lasting thoughts.
So I will close this out. And my thoughts, as always, when I'm leaving is to love yourself and to love others. Love on yourself, enjoy yourself, spend time with yourself, and figure out what it is that you like, you enjoy, and live in that truth. Although we do face risks when we are ourselves, when we know ourselves, we have more power than we think we do. And if you're looking for a sign to love yourself and to figure out what you like, this is it. If you needed permission, this conversation was your permission. And I always go with love on yourself and love other people. And for those who didn't connect fully with the conversation, spend a little bit of time and figure out why maybe it didn't connect with you, or why you dislike women who love themselves. And I think that's more for us as Black women. If you see a woman who is loving herself and living in her own truth, if you are coming up with something shady to say consistently, we may need to do some internal work to figure out why we feel that way. And that's important so that we can love on others and so that we can love ourselves.
Yeah. Absolutely. Dr. Jennifer, thank you for taking the time out and hopping on the podcast and having this conversation. We really enjoy having this conversation with you. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This was so fun.
Awesome. And so to everybody who's watching or listening, thank you for tuning in, and keep it locked. So we're going to have more episodes coming your way. Bye, guys.
Bye.